Number 5.
My dad had just started to leave me and my kid brother alone. I was 14 at the time, and my brother was 10. I was one of those more mature teenagers, and I liked to stay in and study rather than join my friends out at the local park. My dad worked 12-hour shifts, so he'd be gone from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m., or 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. This particular night, he was starting the night shift, and he was a little worried about leaving us for the first time. I assured him we would be fine. I went around the house with him, closing and locking all the windows, making sure the back door was deadlocked and bolted shut, and he listened for me to lock the front door behind him as he left. We lived in a one-story house, so it felt a little safer in the evenings without the added fear of someone coming up the stairs like you see in the movies. I kept my bedroom door open so I could hear my brother on the Nintendo 64 until around 10 p.m. when he eventually crashed out. I closed his bedroom door shut and felt a weird shiver run down my spine. I assumed it was just because the house was now so quiet. I kept the light on in the hallway for a while I studied up on the assignment I had for school, but I eventually crashed at around midnight. I awoke from a miserable dream about 2 a.m. The glare of my computer screen must have woken me up, which was odd, because after an hour, the screensaver normally went into energy-saving mode and switched off. I needed the bathroom anyway, so I got up, still blurry-eyed, and went to the bathroom without a second thought. It was only when I was washing my hands I caught what I thought was a glimpse of someone walking by the bathroom. I felt my heart in my throat, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. After all, nobody could have gotten in. I walked out of the bathroom and into my brother's room, where the door now stood open. He was lying on his bed, exactly where I left him. I slapped his leg, making him jump up, startled. I told him not to be an idiot and stay out of my room, and quit getting up in the night, as he was freaking me out. He muttered something under his breath and turned over. I closed his bedroom door and went back to sleep. There were 3 more nights of strange goings-on. My computer was the first thing to wake me every night at 2 a.m. without fail. But then, there would be cupboards open in the kitchen. The TV would be on in the sitting room, and I had started hearing whispers. I thought I was going batshit crazy. I didn't really believe in ghosts, so I'd blame my brother, the only logical explanation. We argued like crazy. He claimed he hadn't done anything, and to prove it, he would sleep in my bedroom that night. We both switched out the light at 11 p.m. I was exhausted from so many nights spent lying awake. I easily fell asleep, or maybe it was the comfort of having someone else in the room with me, even if it was just my brother. He had a sleeping bag on the floor beside my bed. It was only an hour later that I was awoke from a heavy sleep by my brother. I could hear teenagers walking outside. Obviously, they were headed home, as they lived on our street. He was stood upright, looking down at me. "Hey, maybe we should, say hello to your friends, ask them in for a party or something while Dad's at work." "What the hell? No, go back to sleep," I groaned. But he prodded my arm. His face was a pale gray color, and I could see from his wide eyes something was seriously wrong. "It sounds like Steven. I like him, he's funny," he said, but he didn't raise a smile. I knew there was something wrong. I sat up and slowly grabbed my keys quietly from beside my bed. He nodded at me. I gave him the keys quietly, and he walked out of my room. My heart was in my mouth. I didn't even want to think about what he saw. I swung my legs off the bed ready to make a dash for it. As my feet dropped to the floor, I felt something grab my ankle. I didn't even think. A blood-curdling scream fell from my mouth as I ran towards my brother, who had the door wide open. I picked him up without a second thought, hearing the sound of heavy steps gaining on us. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. I ran from the house and down the street to my friend's house. No one followed us that night. My dad came home from work after I called the police. They found nobody in the house. My brother gave a brief description of the man he saw staring at him from underneath my bed. He had only caught a glimpse of the guy from turning over and then pretended to sleep for 5 minutes before hearing the kids outside in the street, and used it as an excuse to get out. I can't even imagine the fear he must have felt. He doesn't like to talk about it, and now sleeps with his very large German Shepherd dog by his side.
Number 4.
I spent the past 8 years in federal prison. The incident I'm about to divulge to you are the true events that took place that sent me to prison. One night I was casually lying on my bed, watching some Jeopardy, and munching on a tuna sandwich. The time was around 3 a.m., and I was getting tired, so I went to the restroom to brush my teeth. I was just beginning to brush the back of my mouth when I heard the TV flip on. I didn't pay much attention to it because I knew my older brother was home with me. I finished brushing my teeth and started to my bedroom when I saw no one was watching the TV. I just thought maybe my brother had forgotten to turn it off, so I turned it off for him. On the way back to my room, I peeked in my brother's room to tell him that he left the TV on. The first thing I saw was him sleeping. Of course, I didn't wake him up. I just thought that he must have been really tired. I got to my room and jumped into bed, turned off the lights, and went to sleep. At around 6:15 a.m., I was awoken by a loud crashing noise coming from the kitchen. I got up and went to see if my parents had arrived home from work. When I got to the kitchen and flipped on the lights, I was surprised to see the whole refrigerator flipped on its side on the floor. Worried, I ran to my brother's room. When I got there, what I saw made me scream. A tall, dark, suited man was standing next to my brother, who was lying in his bed. The man's face was pure white, but till this day I'm certain I saw him grin. Horrified by what I had just seen, I ran back to the kitchen and grabbed a knife out of the counter. I waited to see if the man would come out, and he never did. After about 5 minutes of waiting, I quietly walked back to the room. All that was there was blood, and my brother, who was dead. I tried telling the police what happened, but I ended up being locked up in federal prison for manslaughter. They told me that there was no one else that was seen walking into or out of the house, and there were no fingerprints of anyone suspicious. They also said that I was carrying the knife that had killed my brother.
Number 3.
My name is Sara, and I was in high school when this incident happened. I was studying abroad in the USA, and I had made 2 close friends, Linda and Melanie. We loved spending time at Linda's because she had a big house with a pool, and it was summer. So we all decided to have a sleepover at Linda's and have a great time together. Melanie and I went to her place together. We were neighbors, so we just took the bus together to Linda's house. When we were sitting on the bus, I noticed a guy looking directly at us. He was probably in his 30s, and he had a hoodie, which was strange because it was summer. But I didn't really care about him. I thought he probably was just thinking about his life and looking at us by accident. Melanie and I arrive at Linda's around 2:35 p.m. or so, and we go straight to the pool. We are there just having a great time. Linda's parents said they wanted to go on a date together that night and asked if that was okay, if we were going to be okay alone in the house. We said it was fine, and so they left. We got out of the pool by 5 p.m. to go eat and shower. Melanie had begun showering. Linda and I had already finished and were waiting for her so that we could have dinner and watch a movie. That's when someone knocked at the door, really loud. It was around 7 p.m. now. It was clear outside because it was summer. Linda looked out the little window by the door to see no one out there. We just figured it was a kid playing around. Melanie got out of the shower, and we had dinner and we started looking for a movie to watch. Time went by and 9 p.m. arrived. We were laughing, making fun of some silly movie titles, when suddenly we hear a really loud knock on the door. And then again, and again. Someone was knocking on the door for 1 minute or so. Linda says that there's nothing to worry about. It's probably some kid or whatever. She went and answered the door, and I could hear a male voice saying, "Hello, sorry to bother you, but do you want to buy a magazine? I have some here in my backpack." When he said that, I think to myself, who sells magazine at this hour? Linda answered, "Oh, it's okay, we're fine." He continues to insist, "But they are really good. I bet your friends would love them." When he said that, I got really scared. How did he know she had friends over? Linda said, "No, they don't want any magazines. We are fine. Good night." And the words that fell out of his mouth next froze my heart. I bet Sarah would love these magazines. I then go and look through the window and see the same man with the hoodie who had been staring at me on the bus. I got really scared and slammed the door and locked it. I told my friends who he was, and we locked every door and window in the house. We went straight to bed. We slept in the same bed and locked the room door for protection. We couldn't sleep, so we just chatted until around 2 a.m. We had a light on because I wanted to get my phone that was in a little table in the room. I looked outside the window and I saw him just standing there in front of the house. I told my friends, and Linda said, "That's it, I'm calling my parents." She called them, and they were already on the way. When they arrived, the guy wasn't there anymore. I'll never forget his face. With that expression, I probably wouldn't even have the chance to tell people this story if I hadn't shut the door that night.
Number 2.
This story was submitted by a female viewer. I was at a graduation party with my boyfriend of 4 months. We'll call him Robert. It was at my grandparents' house. They were on vacation in Florida. Their house was a big ranch house with acres of woods in the backyard. It was the stereotypical high school party: alcohol, loud music, and pot. I was no stranger to drinking, so when I became foggy after just 1 beer, I was slightly stunned. Fast forward to everyone leaving and calling it a night. I went outside to get some fresh air, and I noticed I was followed by Robert, which was fine until he started trying to make a move on me. I pushed him aside and said I was going to throw up, thinking maybe the thought of me throwing up would gross him out and he would leave me alone. I was wrong. He kept trying again and again. I was starting to feel uncomfortable. He was never this forceful. We hadn't had sex yet anyway, so I don't know why he was so pushy. After a few minutes of this, he went back inside grumbling about how he would just go get some from some other girl. I could care less. I was too focused on not falling over. I was slightly dizzy at this point. I turned around to go back inside when I saw Robert just staring at me. I see 2 of his friends emerge from inside the house, and what Robert did still haunts me to this day. He walks toward me and puts his hand on my shoulders and says "We're going to rape you now." He said it with a smile, an evil smile. Trying to keep a clear, focused mind, I tried to plan an escape route. His grip was getting tighter. I tried to wiggle away, but he was much stronger than me. So I went for the one thing I knew would get him to let go. I kneed him right in the balls. He let go and I made a run for it, adrenaline racing through me. I ran straight for the woods. I know these woods like the back of my hand. I have a treehouse in these woods. My sight starting to become doubled. I then knew what was going on. They drugged me. I could hear them in the distance taunting me and calling out my name. I stopped and hid in a bush to try and get an idea of where they were and to throw up. They were close. I could hear the leaves crunching beneath their feet. I started to run again. I was close to the treehouse. I dug in my pocket for my phone, but remembered I left it in the kitchen. I was close to the treehouse. I was also close to passing out. I could feel it. I reached the treehouse and began to climb. I no longer heard them running, or even their voices. I continued to climb. I was halfway there and then blackness. I woke up the next day on the ground, unharmed and untouched. I got up and made my way back to the house, still very dizzy. When I made it back, they were nowhere in sight, gone as if nothing had happened. I checked my phone and Robert had messaged me. "I had fun last night. I'm so happy you can take a joke. See you tonight." I messaged him saying we are through and that I never wanted to see him again. I haven't heard from him since.
Number 1.
My friend and I were staying the night at a hotel, and it was around 10 p.m. We were just messing around and watching TV. Then shortly later we were preparing to go to bed, as we had a game the next day. We had just laid down when we heard a knock on the door. We expected it to be our coach or a teammate, but we instead were greeted by a man and a child. The man looked to be in his 30s, maybe early 40s. He was pretty tall, but quite skinny. The kid looked to be around 7. I greeted them and asked them what I could do for them, which he replied, can we come in?" I, of course, replied no. He then said, "We just need to borrow your phone to call someone." They wouldn't let us use the phone at the front desk. I looked back at my friend, who looked unsure and shook his head no. The man then replied, "Please, we will be quick." I replied, I don't know. A teammate from across the hall must have heard the commotion because he opened the door and shook his head no, and then shut it again. The man then spoke loudly, asking to please enter the room, and then let out a grunt. Just a few seconds later, I received a text message from my teammate that had opened the door and shook his head. It read, in capital letters, "Don't let them in." The man tried for at least 10 more minutes to convince us to let him in the room. During that time, the kid managed to tell us that the man wasn't his father. After he said that, I quickly shut the door and locked it. A few minutes later, I looked out the window and saw the man standing at the curb without the child. I've never heard anything of what happened to either after that.